so weird.
Is he aware of that? Is he aware that the guitarist is you?
Yeah.
Okay.
I think I told him like who was on the tracks and what was
Okay.
going on and kind of the vibe. And
right.
what the idea was with these. And I remember specifically mentioning too that Chris was so interested in maybe hearing him play piano on it. So and he goes, okay. And he pops it in. He said, I'm going to listen. This was the best. Starts blaring out of the speakers. And then he leans over to me and says, okay, I'm going to listen. And then you tell me what you want me to do.
Wow.
I was like, what?
Wow.
I'm going to tell you what to do, which I guess is what you're supposed to do when you're producing something. But that seems so odd. It was just, So he's listening and he listens for about 30 seconds. He's like, oh man, this is wide open. I can hear all kinds of stuff on this. But kind of the bottom line that I want to sort of get across here is that it was so organic and not like it wasn't a thing that was going through a management or any kind of, you know what I mean? It was just literally like a guy that was interested in maybe working on this project. He heard about it through a friend. Yeah. And it was just happening so organically that that was blowing my mind, that it was just like, because, how do you even get to Eddie Van Halen to see if he's interested, and 9 times out of 10, it'd get filtered through other people, and then it'd get watered down, and the idea would just, and he'd probably say, I'm not interested. But this was happening this really fun, organic, beautiful way.
But Pete, you're forgetting one thing. The guy on the goddamn tape is fucking Chris Cornell, who's one of the greatest singers in rock history. Okay. So, you're going in there with gold already. I mean, Chris Cornell is like, forget it. I mean, he's unbelievable.
But I'm gonna let you down a little bit here, because the only thing is there was no vocal on it. It was just me Okay. So, and this is where the story goes a little bit awry, because what ends up happening is, so Ed's interested in working on it, and he, expresses some interest and stuff, and he says, okay, let me live with it for a little bit, and then, and I'll see what I can come up with. I said, okay, here's another great part about, before I get into the story going awry part, is that I remember his remote for his Studio 24 track was broken. And so he used to record analog tape only, up there, and just that's what he was into.
Yeah. Wow.
But the remote for the Studer's broken, so he starts working on this song, and it was the song Scream. And he calls me a couple days later and asks me if I can come up. He calls me a couple times. He says, okay, so I did this really cool part on it, kind of like at the beginning of Women in Love, like on Van Halen 2, like where I did the tapping thing with the harmonics. He's like, I'm doing some stuff like that. It's really cool. And I'm just at home listening. He's telling me this. I'm just like, this is mind-blowing.
Wow.
He's telling me this is happening. This is so cool. So he says, how soon can you come up and listen? And I said, whenever you want, I'll come up tomorrow. I go back up, and so he plays it for me, what he's done. He's done a few tracks and done a few different things on there. I'm trying to be present in the moment, because it was like, I'm playing on the same track as Eddie Van Halen. Like, this is very, I'm like, man, like, those moments where you're like face to face with your childhood, and you're like, I think I've arrived somewhere in this moment. Yeah. Like, this is unbelievable for me. Yeah. So,
and did he play both guitar and piano on the track?
So he said, I'm not really into playing piano. He said, that's not what I want to do on this.
Oh.
So I said, no problem.
Wow. Okay.
Yeah, I said, okay. Yeah, so no problem. But he had done some really interesting, like, atmospheric kind of stuff, and this clean kind of tapping stuff, like you heard on the, beginning of Women in Love, that kind of thing. So It was really cool. But what I did think in that moment was, we need a vocal on this, so that if we're going to go any further with this, you can know where to go with it.
Right.
You need a guide. You need to hear the melody. You need to hear what's happening. So I said, why don't I get Chris to sing a guide vocal on it? And then, and he said, that's a great idea. And so I said, okay. And I went away with that. And now, as I mentioned a little bit earlier, I worked with Chris for a number of years. I mean, we played over 300 shows together, friends for a long, long time. But one thing that Chris would do, as a lot of artists do sometimes, is just kind of disappear, like, for a little while, like when you weren't working, or when you were, he just wouldn't answer emails or texts or things like that. That would happen. And then all of a sudden he'd pop up out of the blue. He'd be like, hey man, what's going on?
Wow.
Okay. So I emailed him and I said, hey man, remember you were talking about Eddie working on this track? Well, I met him through another friend, through a third party. And I said, it's actually happening. He's played on the track already. I said, it's mind blowing. Can't believe it. This is all happening, but we really need a guide vocal at this point. Can you get me something? And I got no response.
Oh my God, are you serious?
Yeah.
Oh no.
Yeah, that's what happened. He was my boss too, right? So I don't want to hassle him. I don't want to bother him. I don't want to try to be diplomatic. So I asked him a couple times over a couple weeks, hey, like, just kind of, give him a little nudge via email. I might have left him a phone message, and I never heard back. And I just thought, am I pissing him off? I don't want to, because it's just how, when you're a sideman like me, spent most of my life working as a sideman, you don't want to anger these folks. So it's like, I just was like, I'm just going to step off for a minute here. Maybe he's got stuff going on. I don't know what, something. So that happened. And then I went up to, it was actually Janie's birthday party, his wife. And I ended up going up for a birthday party up there and saw him, and he said, "Hey man, I'm really sorry. I'm starting to get really busy with like working on the record and stuff, and I don't know when I'm going to have time to, to keep working on the track." Because they were starting to do, different things around that on different kind of truth,
right?
Experimenting with producers. And
yep.
He said, "I'm just getting kind of busy and stuff." I said, "Dude, let's not worry about it." I said, "It's been tough to get in touch with Chris." And I said, "We're friends. We'll figure it out if it, And that was kind of where we left it.
Oh my God. How did Chris drop the ball on that?
I know. Now, if a couple of years later, just to kind of wrap up that story, a couple of years after that, Chris hits me up and says, "Hey man, do you remember that Scream version that you were working on for me?"
Oh my God.
And I said, "Yeah." "You mean the one I was trying to get you to sing on so that we could continue working with Eddie on it?" And he says, "Can you get me that by like tomorrow? Because I need it." He did a tour called the Songbook Tour back around 2011.
Right. I remember it.
Yeah. And what he would do is on part of the show, he kind of, had a stage set look like a living room, and he had a turntable up there, and he would drop the needle on a couple records and sort of jam along. That was part of his and it was neat. And he wanted to put that song on an LP so that he could kind of play along with it. I said, "Yeah, I've got it. I'll send it to you." But it wasn't the version that Ed worked on, because that was on a reel up to 5150.
Right.
So it was my acoustic guitar, track, bass, and drums. He had it put on an LP, and he actually played to it. And so there's YouTubes of that. You can see that version, but, not with that on it. So long story short, there was never a vocal done on it. There was never a mix done. It wasn't finished. But it's a cool story nonetheless.
Wow.
Oh, my God. So is that one of the tracks that at the 5150 volt, just waiting to be open to the world? Yeah.
Yeah. On a reel somewhere. Sure. Yeah,
oh my God.
Right.
I tell you, I have such a fear that entire place with all of those tapes, it's just, they're all just going to go to dust. Because unless you digitize them and bake them and do the proper thing with them, they're not going to be worth using.
I kind of, there's part of me that thinks that maybe that's happened. I don't know, but I would think that they're pretty on top of that stuff.
I would think so too. My gut feels.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yep.
Okay. Well, just a quick question, if you don't mind, a follow-up, Pete. Because Chris was your boss, were you nervous about going to Ed without him knowing?
No, because he actually presented the idea to me. One of the things that I think Chris liked about me was that I was a go-getter and would kind of facilitate things and make them happen. Had I done it, maybe if it wasn't his, if he'd never... you know what? I kind of think that even if it was something that I'd just done on my own and then brought it to him, he probably would have dug it or been interested at least in the idea. I just didn't want to push him on his time. That was the main thing.
No,
but
of course.
That's it. He was a great guy, man. He was super cool, and Chris and Ed. I tell you what, one of the first people I contacted after Chris passed away was Ed.
Really?
I said, "Can I come up and see you?" Yeah, I said, "I just want to come see you," because I was just trying to get in touch with folks I knew that were, I don't know, like. Yeah. I told him, I go, "Dude, you're kind of like my spiritual musical guitar godfather."
What did he say to that?
He knew how close I was to Chris, because we stayed friends after all that.
Oh,
we
wow.
stayed tight and talked, and we would often text and stuff, even if I was on the road. I spoke quite often, so it was really cool.
That's awesome, man. That's awesome. So now, were you able to kind of separate the guitar god and the guy? I mean, obviously he's a guy, and obviously, to all of us, he's like a guitar god. But when you know him, he's a guy. He's a regular musician. Yeah. Were you able to kind of make that separation and realize that, there's all the incredible legend and history and music, but then there's the guy. That's Ed, and that's his shop, and that's his gig, and does it become sort of like becoming friends with Santa Claus or something? I mean, it's like you kind of know beyond the mythic figure, there's just a man.
Definitely.
Yeah.
Almost to the point where sometimes I would not forget, but it was like, I bet Mitch can relate to this. Just kind of it's out of, wanting to be comfortable is so you sort of go way far into he's a guy and I just need to be comfortable with that. I don't know if you felt this, Mitch, but sometimes I'd leave his place or something and then I'd go, "Whoa, what just happened? That was Ed." Yes. What I mean?
Yeah, he was very disarming in the way that he was just so human. And,
right.
And the human when Pete said his first encounter with Ed,
he did something that was just so human. And that's how he was with me. He did the same thing with me when I arrived at 5150. I got a little limo and I had sunglasses on because I was in LA and it was bright and shiny and sunny. Mm-hmm. And he pulled my glasses down and looked into my eyes. That's the first thing he did.
Right. Yeah. Yeah.
I love that bit.
Absolutely.
Yeah, and I've never told Pete that, but that's the first thing he did. He pulled my glasses. He took his hand, pulled my glasses down, looked into my eyes, and he goes, "Oh, great! I just had to see your eyes." And then he kissed me on the cheek and hugged me.
That's funny. That's funny.
So
tell me, guys, what will this show entail? What's going to be in it? Obviously, there's many eras of Van Halen. What are you going to include, and how did you go about putting it together?
Yeah, we're putting it together now, and we decided very early on in our first conversation that we'd really like to concentrate on the Dave era, because that's what we grew up on, and that was really, for us, that's really Van Halen. I mean, we both love Sam, and he's obviously amazing, and what he did with Ed was also great, but that was further along, So for us, Van Halen was the Dave era, really. That for us is the really fun stuff. And we might hit on a couple of Sam songs, some of the big ones, but it's primarily going to be the Dave era stuff.
Okay.
Now, Mitch, are you concerned about any criticism as a singer that you're not singing the Sam stuff, that people are just going to fold their arms and go, "Oh, well, of course Mitch isn't going to sing the Sammy stuff. He's afraid to sing the Sammy stuff."
It's funny you should say that, because I would think it would be the opposite, actually.
Yeah.
Because I can sing the Sam stuff.
Yeah, he totally can.
The Dave stuff is more of a challenge, because Dave's voice was so amazing. He was such a character.
Yeah.
But here's the other thing. I have the advantage of a lot of people knowing that I was part of Van Halen. I kind of get a pass, right? So I kind of am able to be myself within the music. So, I mean, that's, at least in my mind, that's my approach. So I want to remind people of Dave, and I certainly don't want to make anybody cringe and take it so far out of the way that it's not that music anymore. I have to pay tribute to what Dave did, but I have to do it with my voice, because, I'm not Dave.
Are you going to go for the big songs, or are you going to go deep into some album cuts, or how have you picked them?
I'll let Pete take that.
I mean, Mitch kind of presented me with this list, and I was like, this looks awesome. Like, I could come up with very little that I wanted to change, because we really do have this similar connection to the music, I think, which means, the hits are great, and you got to have some of that, but the deep cuts are super fun too. I don't really that's a hard one for me, because I don't really differentiate, like, when it comes to Van Halen 1 and Van Halen 2. Yeah, like, they're all so great. Like, and so I'm like, oh yeah, was this song a single or this one? Like, I don't even remember. Like, I couldn't even tell you, to be honest, on Fair Warning. Like, was Hear About It Later a big single? Was Unchained a big single? Was Mean Street? Because all those songs to me are like epic cuts that are like, I know there's the album tracks that are maybe the deeper cuts where it's like obvious, where it's not, like Intruder or something,
right.
But I just kind of looked at it and went, yeah. And what's neat about the last kind of era of Van Halen, where, as I understand it, Wolf was kind of the architect of the set list a lot. Yes. They kind of started doing a lot of those older, deeper cuts and stuff, which the fans just, it was so great. So I think that's kind of the way you got to do some of the hits, and you got to go deep too, because that's what people are,
that's really well put, Pete. But so to summarize it, it's like, this is a show for real Van Halen fans, who really like all the stuff, or like almost all the stuff on the records. Like, we're going to do Jump, and we're going to do Panama, we're going to do Hopper Teacher, but we're also going to do, Light Up the Sky. We're also going to do I'm the One. But like Pete said, for us, those are the same as Panama.
Right.
It's all the same.
Sure.
Running with the Devil is the same as Panama or whatever. You know what I mean? Like, it's all the same.
Equally epic.
Right.
Yeah. Right. Now, Pete, as a guitarist, you're there and you're like, all right, I'm going to play some Van Halen. But also as a guitarist, you're like, oh man, I'm going to be playing some Van Halen. Right? So are there any songs where you're like, yeah, sure, Mitch, we can do that song, and you're running to your room and you're like, oh my God, I got to practice this for like a month straight? to get this.
You know, I am somewhat like that, but I might have been more like that had I not done. I did a tour last year 2 years ago now in the UK with a group called Classic Rock Show. One of the things we did was, it's like a whole smorgasbord of songs from The Who, with Zeppelin and Fleetwood Mac and like tons of great bands. And one of the things we did was I played Eruption into Jump. So instead of going into You Really Got Me, we did Eruption and segue into Jump, you know.
Nice.
Now, I had to do that, and it was like pretty big, you know, theater shows. There's a couple thousand people a night, and it was like, I'm going to go play Eruption 30 times in the UK. I can't suck. Like, this has got to be good, you know. And somehow I did that every night.